Quadeca has had one of the most insane creative progressions I've seen of any modern artist. Going from making FIFA videos in his bedroom, to imitating styles of rap, to creating some of the most beautiful, somber, and comprehensive pieces of work in the modern music space. And one of the main things that stands out above all else in his music is the production. So today I'm lifting the veil and going over everything that makes Quadeca's production so unique and honestly genius. And this includes his use of unique time signatures, his fingerstyle guitars and the mixing that goes along with it, his masterful arrangement, and his shoegaze influence. So with that being said, the first thing we're gonna go over is his unique time signatures. And when I say unique, I don't mean he's using like 11/13 and 12/68, some crazy math rock nonsense like that. He's just making use of time signatures that aren't 4/4. And one of the most prevalent ones that he uses is going to be 6/8. And this time signature is used in songs like Picking Up Hands and Texas Blue. So in FL Studio, to change the time signature of your project, all you're gonna do is go over to the top left to Options, click on it, go to Project General Settings, and here you'll be able to change the numerator and the denominator of your time signature. So yeah, that's gonna cover time signatures, not a super huge aspect of his production, but important to cover nonetheless. And before I get into the next section of this tutorial, which is fingerstyle guitars, I wanna mention that you can grab the FLP for this beat for only $5 by becoming a member of my Patreon down below. That way, if you wanted to study the mixing, mastering, arrangement, the melody, the drums, all that kind of stuff, it's right at your fingertips. But enough of that. Let's get into the next section of this tutorial, which is going to be fingerstyle guitars. Now, I laid down my own guitar patterns, which is something I recommend you guys do as well if you have a guitar. And don't worry if you're not that good at guitar, as you can just make use of open tunings like D, A, E, A, C sharp E, like I did in this, or FAC, GCE, that's another very good one. But yeah, open tunings make playing the guitar a lot easier. It's kind of considered cheating, but who cares really? So yeah, with that being said, I just have our main guitar pattern playing these chord arpeggios, as well as a mid-range lead and a high-range lead. For the mixing on that guitar, I really only have down 2 plugins that are making a difference. And that's going to be Cymatic's Origin, which is a free vintage chorus plugin. And vintage chorus is something that Quadeca makes use of a lot in his guitar patterns. And this is especially prevalent in songs like Tell Me a Joke and Picking Up Hands. So yeah, you can go ahead and just copy the settings that I have down right here. Yet again, free plugin, so you don't have to worry about buying anything. As well as that, I have yet another Cymatic's plugin, which is going to be Cymatic's Illusion. And this is essentially just a pitch shifting delay plugin, and it adds those little like distorted bleeps and bloops in the background of the guitar pattern. Not something that's necessarily essential, but it does make the guitar much more colorful and interesting. So just to show how important those effects are for capturing Quadeca's style, I'm gonna play the guitar melody without them. Sounds cool, but it's not Quadeca. So that's gonna completely cover his fingerstyle guitars and the mixing behind them. Now, the next portion of the tutorial is going to be the largest part, but the most important, and that's going to be his masterful arrangement. And basically, all you wanna keep in mind when arranging beats like this is that you want every single 8 bars to be different. Not in like a beat switch kind of way, but more so you wanna be introducing something new and fresh every 8 bars. And you can achieve this by manipulating 3 main aspects of your beat. And that's going to be the melodies, the drums, and creative effects. And some melodic components you should make use of are going to be weird synths, orchestral components, and super lush keys or pads. So for the unique synth, all I did was take this key from Analog Lab and just play a bunch of random notes in the scale. It doesn't really matter what you play since we're going to be adding some creative effects on it. And the effect that's going to give it those bleeps and bloops yet again is going to be Cymatic's Illusion. Now you can just scroll through the presets and find what you like, but the main thing you want to make sure of is that the mix level is at 100%. Because if not, you're just going to be playing a bunch of random off-time notes in tandem with these bleeps and bloops. You only want the bleeps and bloops. As for the orchestral components, I just grabbed this string swell from Splice and used this super big brass, yet again, from Analog Lab. And for those really lush keys, yet again, I used Analog Lab. And for the creative mixing, I threw down this custom Portal preset that I made, which essentially just gives it really subtle, high-octave reverse crystal grains. And if you want some Portal presets like this for free, I'll throw my Dimensions Portal bank in the description down below so you can download some sick Portal presets that you can use on your melodies. But yeah, as you can see, I have each of these melodic components dispersed at different portions of the beat. You don't want to throw everything that you have all at once because you want to have something that you can use to make every 8 bars different, like I mentioned. Now, the next component that you can manipulate to make sure your beat stays fresh with the arrangement is going to be drums. And some drum components you should make use of are going to be tame yet experimental percussion, as well as very large drum sounds. And for that percussion loop, all I did was take a bunch of Foley samples from my Wavelength Foley percussion kit and just made a relatively simple pattern out of them. Nothing too crazy. After that, I routed every single Foley sample to a singular mixing bus just to make things easier. And I threw down an EQ, just completely taking out those lows and taking out those highs, just really focusing on those high mids, as well as a delay, a reverb, and a transient processor to kind of tame the percussion loop. So yet again, just to demonstrate the importance of those effects, this is what it sounds like without them. And then for the drums, all I did was take a bunch of drums from my Surge drum suite. And I know it sounds like I'm plugging pretty much every single kit that I have in this video, but these are really just the kits that I use to make my beats. When I make kits, I'm more so making them for me and then putting them out there. But yeah, we're just making use of a bunch of experimental and large drum sounds. So to demonstrate the importance of all of these arrangement techniques, I'm gonna play the beat starting from here, and it's going to introduce those keys, those orchestral components, the percussion, and those bleep bloops. And then I'm gonna let it play into the next section, which introduces the drums. And another thing that's incredibly important with arrangement is that there are moments in your beat where there is a lot going on, and there are also moments in your beat where there's not a lot going on. These kind of ebbs and flows of energy throughout your beat are going to give them a sense of suspense and release. There's going to be big moments that are leading up to big monumental drops, and there's also going to be moments where it's pretty bare bones and not a lot is going on. It's very good to have this kind of dichotomy of low energy and high energy, as it makes your beats much more interesting. So I know that was a lot, but that's going to pretty much cover arrangement. Now the next portion of Quadeca's production that I want to get into is going to be his shoegaze influence, and this influence is super prevalent in songs like Tell Me a Joke, and in a more experimental fashion, What's It to Him? And for these shoegaze portions, you only need 4 main things. The first of which is going to be some kind of distorted electric guitar. Yet again, I recommend throwing down these guitars yourself if you're capable. And something I did just to make this portion much more big and grand is I played the same guitar pattern twice and have one of them panned all the way to the left and the other panned all the way to the right. This is just going to make your guitars much more big and wide without having to make use of like widening plugins, which can cause phasing issues. And then for the mixing, I just threw down Archetype Corey Wong with the full smush lead preset, as well as an EQ just taking out those muddy low ends. The second thing that you're gonna need is some kind of bass, and I just have my bass playing a very simple 8th note rhythm. And then for the mixing on that bass, yet again, I have down Archetype Corey Wong with the P bass preset. And then the third thing you're gonna need are some kind of huge acoustic drums. And for this, I'm just using Addictive Drums with the Funk Poppin' preset. But I feel like this is a moment where it's acceptable to use like splice loops or something like that. The only disadvantage to that is that you won't have full creative control, which is why I like using VSTs like these. And I'm just playing a pattern making use of huge open hats. And I'm also just playing a pretty consistent kick and snare pattern up until the end where I introduce a fill with both the kick, snare, and some toms. And then as for the mixing on those drums, I just have down some saturation, nothing else. And the fourth and final thing you're gonna want for your shoegaze portion is going to be some kind of heavy distorted synth. Now, this isn't necessarily essential, but you're gonna wanna have some kind of experimental element of this section that makes it so that it's not just shoegaze. So for that, I just have down this huge distorted brass, yet again from Analog Lab, and it's just playing a relatively simple lead pattern. And to transition from the first portion of the beat to the shoegaze portion, I have this moment of silence, which is interrupted by that distorted brass. So with that being said, this is what the entirety of that shoegaze portion sounds like. So yeah, that's gonna completely cover everything you need to know about Quadeca's genius production and how you can make his style of beats for yourself. And before I wrap up this tutorial, I wanna mention that you should be mentally prepared to take a long time making these beats. These are whole compositions. These aren't just 8-bar loop, repeat, repeat, repeat. As you can see here, this beat took me nearly 5 hours to make. But this is one of my favorite beats that I've ever made, so don't be afraid to put a ton of work in it. Don't be afraid to come back to it and leave it at certain points, because the amount of time that you put into these beats is 100% worth it. So yeah, I hope you learned something new with this tutorial. If you have any questions, please throw them down in the comments below and I will do my best to answer them. Also, yet again, consider checking out my Patreon as you get the FLPs for all of my beats in all of my videos. That way, if you wanted to study the mixing, mastering, arrangement, melodies, drums, all that kind of stuff, it's right at your fingertips. And finally, consider subscribing as I post one tutorial a week and one sound kit a month. Other than that, it's gonna be it. Peace!